let's talk about some healthcare news. Last week, the Trump administration's Justice Department said it would no longer defend the Affordable Care Act in court, specifically the part of the law that protects up to 130 million Americans with pre-existing conditions from being denied coverage by insurance companies. The Justice Department took the position as part of a case in which Texas and 19 other conservative attorneys general are challenging the Affordable Care Act as unconstitutional. We are going to talk about what an unusual and dramatic step this is by the Justice Department with our guest, Don Verrilli, whose job it was to defend the ACA to the Supreme Court when he was Obama's Solicitor General. But I thought you and I should talk about sort of the political aspects of this story first. First of all, just another example of how unbelievably awful Jeff Sessions is as Attorney General. There was this decision that happened, I think this came out on Thursday night. Today, on Monday, Jeff Sessions, by the way, also decided that the United States will no longer grant asylum to victims of domestic violence or gang violence. That those will no longer be categories by which we look to people coming here from other countries fleeing violence and say, we will grant you asylum, which is just beyond despicable to me. And we should just take a second to talk about that before we get back to the healthcare thing.
It runs so counter to who we as Americans at least thought we were prior to this moment that it is sickening. And I think it is a reminder, and I don't want to get overly dark here, but we get caught up in the tweets and the Mueller investigation and what crazy thing did Trump do today, or where is Melania, or all of this. And what we are missing underneath even the policy travesties of this administration is just this fundamental shift in what it means to be an American, what it means to be America. That it just, there's some very basic things that have been at the core of our national narrative to ourselves of why we thought our country was exceptional and different. And we, like I said, I say this all the time. We have very often failed to live up to that belief in ourselves. But Trump and Sessions and Kirstjen Nielsen and everyone else are eroding that on a daily basis because the president is, for better or worse, sets the moral tone for the country. And we have an amoral human being in that office right now. And so the idea is we're now going to polarize the country around this idea. It will now be, for a significant portion of the Republican Party, a sign of weakness to care about the most vulnerable immigrants, the ones that, despite all the other fights about legalization, the dreamers, anything else, the one thing that there has been some measure of bipartisan agreement on was asylum seekers. That was truly at the core of what our country was about. And that changed today. And it's going to take a lot of work to get that back. It really is.
This decision also reveals that Donald Trump's immigration policy is not about fixing a broken immigration system. It is not about protecting Americans from crime or from gangs or from drugs. It is not about protecting American jobs. Because if it was, there are a whole bunch of policies that they could have pursued that would have maybe done those things. This immigration policy is about cruelty. It is about telling people from other countries, you do not look like we do, and we do not want you here. We are going to separate, we're going to tear away children from their parents when they come here, fleeing from violence. For all the talk about MS-13, we want to protect Americans from gangs. These are people who are fleeing from gangs, fleeing from gang violence, fleeing from domestic violence, coming to the United States saying, please save me. Do not send me back here. Save me, save my children. And we are saying, no, go back. We don't want you. And there is no good reason for that. There's no reason for that other than pure fucking racism. It is despicable. Despicable.
Yeah, the message and belief of the Republican Party under Trump, and the message we're sending to the world, is that empathy is weakness.
That's right.
That compassion is weakness. That if you feel for these people, then you are soft and you are not welcome. And that is a lesson that we are teaching to a generation of Trump supporters. And we are digging ourselves in this country. Trump, or let me put it this way, Trump is digging America into a deep moral hole that's going to take a long time to come out of.
And by the way, we've said this before too. Why does Jeff Sessions still keep his job after Trump attacks him on Twitter all the time about the Russia investigation? Well, Jeff Sessions keeps his job because while Rod Rosenstein is dealing with the Russia investigation and is in the spotlight, Jeff Sessions can go off and do all the horrible things on immigration that he's been dreaming about doing his entire career. And now back to this Affordable Care Act decision, this is another thing that Jeff Sessions gets to do, which is take this very unusual step, very not unprecedented, but almost unprecedented step of saying that the Justice Department is not going to defend the law of the land. And I have to say, politically, last week we were talking about how to keep healthcare in the news, since it's the top issue for most voters. Is this an actual gift for Democrats, this decision? And how should we talk about it? How should Democrats talk about it from now until the election?
I think the simplest message is the Trump administration, the Republicans, want to believe that protections for people with pre-existing conditions is unconstitutional. And they want to take those protections away from tens of millions of Americans.
Yeah.
If you want to stop that from happening, elect Democrats.
Yeah. And look, that's a message that's not just going to be popular with Democratic voters or even independent voters, but Republican voters as well. I mean, Donald Trump himself, at the beginning, when he first became president, said, well, the pre-existing condition part of the law, I like that. That's good. Of course, he then did everything he could to undermine it because he either doesn't care or he's a liar or he's too stupid to understand how the law works, probably a combination of all of the above. But now you're right. His administration is on record saying that pre-existing conditions, they believe that the law that protects people with pre-existing conditions is unconstitutional, and they are siding with insurance companies that want to screw people over. That's where the Trump administration put themselves. And even Donald Trump, by the way, can't believe that this is politically smart because of all the things he talks about on Twitter, of all the comments he makes. He has not said a word about this, a word, because he knows how unpopular it is.
Yeah, but this is going to be one of those things where this is a gigantic, massively consequential thing. We're talking about it here. Our guest is going to talk about it, but it's also happened in the week of the summit, the week of the war with Canada of 2018, and it is going to be incumbent upon. We will do our part with our little microphones here, but Democrats are going to have to carry this message every single day, in every way possible on the campaign trail. Paid media, earned media. And I think one of the tests will be, I can't remember if we talked about this last week, but Mitch McConnell and what would be a bit of massive but somewhat impressively strategic cynicism, canceled the August recess so the Democrats who need to go home and campaign cannot do so. And Senator Schumer and the Democrats said they were going to spend that time, they were going to make that healthcare month and spend that time talking about healthcare. So this will be the test. Can they leverage that month to draw attention and focus to healthcare? And I think that's the exact right approach to what's a pretty tough deal that McConnell's handed them. But it's that, like, they'll do that in August, and then you got to do it every day between now and Election Day.
Yeah, that's smart of Schumer. And one more thing, we were also talking last week with Ron Klain about how the court should be a top issue for our base, for Democratic voters in 2018. Well, now we've seen how Trump and the Republicans are trying to use the courts to undo the Affordable Care Act. And we also had a ruling today from the Supreme Court that said the state of Ohio is allowed to purge voters from the voter rolls just because they haven't voted in a while, which is something that will disproportionately disenfranchise people of color, people who are poor, people who don't vote very often. And it is an awful decision. I saw Tim Miller on Twitter say, I'd love to hear the MAGA people or even conservatives actually try to defend why this is the right decision, to say it is okay for a state to take people who have registered to vote off the voter registration rolls just because they haven't voted in a couple of years. And I didn't see any good responses to Tim. I didn't see any good defenses there. It is just unbelievable.
I had the answer, which was it helps them win. That's the truth answer. There's no other argument. That's what this is about. Nothing more.
Yeah. And look at this. If you don't think the court's important, you don't think this court is a big issue, we have one of these justices retire. We are going to have, and Trump gets to appoint a justice like Neil Gorsuch. This was a 5-4 decision today. It was down to 5-4. We get another justice like Gorsuch. Things like the Affordable Care Act are in jeopardy. Things like voter protections, voter enfranchise, voting rights are in jeopardy here. It is, Jeff Sessions and his Justice Department, they get to do whatever they want. It is a bad, bad combination, and people should very much care about this issue as we head into November.